Bollywood is a world brand today. You go anywhere in the world and you're likely to meet people who would be aware of the term called Bollywood. All possibilities, it will bring a smile to people's faces. It is a brand of cinema which touches people of all cultures. Though largely driven by Indian diaspora around the world, which itself is around 25 plus million people and growing. It's larger than the population of the whole of Australia, the country where I live. Well, at least for the most months in a year. Outside India though, people have heard about Bollywood. It is still a loosely used term. In Australia, till recent past, the general perception was that any cinema, or for that matter, even television, coming out of India, was classified as Bollywood. That's slowly changing though. I'll come back to that later. The fact is that India produces thousands of films in a year. It is the largest film producing country in the world. There are Tamil films, there are Bengali films, films in Marathi, Punjabi, regional languages, which can all be classified as Indian cinema. So where does Bollywood fit in? Let me elaborate on this. The term Bollywood is used to describe the Hindi language film industry based in Mumbai. This term is often incorrectly used to refer to the whole of Indian cinema, especially outside India. Bollywood is one of the largest centers of film production in the world. It is more formally known as Hindi film cinema. While people of Indian origin watching me speaking perhaps would take all this as common knowledge. However, for non-Indian or common Australians who have grown on foreign, mainly Hollywood films and are interested in Bollywood, must know the definition of real Bollywood. And a lot of people ask me in Australia, where can I find Bollywood in Mumbai? Well, sorry, mate, there is no hill with a sign that says Bollywood in Mumbai. Bollywood does not exist as a physical address. Yes, there are hundreds, if not thousands of studios who all make it happen in Mumbai to give the world the dreams from Bollywood. Now, why define Bollywood? Well, today the topic I have been asked to talk about is the production, distribution and consumption of Bollywood films in Australia. Therefore, defining Bollywood is relevant here. Now, without boring you with too much with technical numbers, I will speak of my own experience. Australia is in a unique position in terms of Bollywood. We in Australia have a great pool of talent, producers, directors, technical, art, creatives, actors, and the lot. I believe it is in Australia's interest to make itself aware, or open itself to the largest film industry in the world. That loosely used term of Bollywood has to be understood first, more of in a cultural perspective. Within Bollywood itself, there are studio-driven films and the independent films, whether they are privately produced, co-productions of films, or even documentaries, television, till we have a real formal production treaty in place between Australia and India, or the independent players who invest for their love for the story, driven by the passion for creating content. It is this independent film productions that I believe will help in the real growth of Australian cinema. Whether it's the entertainment industry, that will help in finding the cultural understanding of the people on both sides. This will have great flow-on effect in other industries, all stemming from the cultural awareness. Yes, Bollywood, as the world knows, is mostly studio-driven, popular cinema with big stars, budgets, epic song scenes, and vibrant colors of the melodrama, which is great. You know, it's a larger than life canvas of the world-class entertainment. And then there is also the independent Bollywood cinema, or the independent productions. The subtle, realistic stories of the world, you know, out of the population of over 1 billion people in India. The stories which capture the middle India of around 400 million people. These are stories for the world, being made for the modern, urban, local and global audiences. Now imagine Australians collaborating with this middle India, you know, the smaller productions, but with very high volume, very high numbers. The outcome can be rewarding for Australia. On the topic of Australian production, here is my own experience. A few years ago, I was asked to budget the production of a small Bollywood film. It was a feature film set in Australia. I spent considerable time talking to people, to film bodies, exchanging emails, and trying to work out a crew of around 35 to 40 people to be shot in Australia. It was an independent Bollywood film of relatively smaller budget compared to the big studio-driven films. But nevertheless, a feature film set for Australian locations would have used Australian and Indian mixed crew. And in the end, you know, we lost out to Mauritius, which offered beach locations, resort accommodations, villas, and the like. You know, the proximity to Bollywood and ease of doing business in Mauritius compelled the producers to take the film to Mauritius instead of Australia. Finally, I had to fly to Mauritius. We spent nearly 30 days in Mauritius and the film was completed. The point I make is this. We in Australia are in a world market competing for Bollywood productions. Every country is vying for that Bollywood dollar. Therefore, we need to make it attractive, more so for the Bollywood micro and small budget films to shoot here in Australia. I'm talking about micro, you know, 200,000, 500,000 to $2 million films. It's been done in other countries, so why not Australia? Now you will ask how. Well, firstly, we in Australia, the film creatives, have to make an effort to sort of reach out to working in Bollywood productions, no matter how small they are. If an Australian DOP has worked on a Bollywood music video, for example, in Australia, is more than likely to work in a bigger Bollywood production later on. A makeup person who understands Indian skin and style can do a better job on a Bollywood actor who will then not only insist to fly his or her own makeup or hairstylist from Mumbai to Australia. And most of all, an understanding of the Bollywood culture. For that matter, the Indian culture at large. Let us not forget, some Indian actors have worked with their hair person or their favorite hair person for 20 years, who is not only a professional hairstylist, but also the actor's emotional confidant. Well, surprised? Don't be. It's an Indian cultural thing. Very normal in a relationship-driven India. This is a small example of cultural awareness when I speak of understanding Bollywood. I get a lot of inquiries for Australian Caucasian talent interested to work in Bollywood. My suggestion always is to find, or first, get an understanding of the real Bollywood. Watch as many films as possible. Learn dance and make an effort to pick up that Hindi language and the culture largely. Simple, isn't it? Perhaps not so, not for someone who has never stepped out of a town or a city in Australia. Can you imagine someone from Australia going to LA to be in a film without understanding the body language, the fashion sense, the American sensibilities and the language? Bollywood is no different. So learn the culture. Now, on the changing face of Bollywood in Australia, I believe, the future is on the cross collaboration is the way forward. As a director of an Australian firm, I am co-producing few indie Bollywood films and helping, directly or indirectly to get the Bollywood awareness in Australia, whether through Australian talent or indirectly, by other means. We are privately making efforts to collaborate with Australia and India. But this year itself, I'm involved in an Aussie-Indian documentary, and KAHWA, our office here, is doing its own bit through privately. We are in final talks with a director of photography, an Australian DOP, to shoot the next feature film this year in India. So in summary, for the Bollywood production scene in Australia, let's open Australia to India to attract business of micro and small budget Bollywood films. Budgets may be small, but the number of operating production houses are much more than big studios. And the flow-on effect can be considerable in terms of people-to-people cross-culture awareness. Yet one must continue to attract the big Bollywood productions. That gives the instant large visibility, but the small budget content must be encouraged to grow along with it. As a parallel, it's not big cinema or small cinema anymore. It's content that's the big deal. More importantly, the other point I want to sort of make in this, we have a perception that Bollywood has to be Indian or an Indian film made out of India. Today, we are living in a global theater. The screen sizes have changed, so have the physical viewing locations. The old theater model is vanishing, or for now, diminishing. What stops us as Australians, to have Bollywood content for the world with multi-platform visibility? The possibilities are limitless. On another note, there is work being done on individual initiative in Australia. Films, large-scale screening of content is a collaborative medium. As a producer or as a creative, one is always looking for good scripts, stories or programs. I'm open to discuss good content. The question is, are we ready to collaborate? Are we ready to share the big picture, of taking the Australian Bollywood cinema to the world together? Personally, I believe that no one could help me if I do not possess a skill set to offer in the industry. And that goes for anyone who wants to collaborate. The production scale can get bigger and far-reaching when many people come together on a project. That is the nature of this business, especially feature films. But in the end, it's the content which must flow out of Australia. That is very much linked to the age-old question of funding in Australia. Well, we cannot always rely on the government bodies to fund our projects. Well, I love the funding coming from anywhere, but though would have loved to have simplified, the offset system for micro-budget Australian producers. It will greatly increase the flow of production in Australia. But having said that, regarding funding, Bollywood or Hollywood, the world's two largest film producing industries, which really don't rely on state funding of projects. Private investment is the key. That's my belief. It does not matter how small. That must be the calling, and it has to go beyond the Indian-Australian investors in Australia. But first, the awareness. That brings in the confidence. And even from an investor's point of view, you've got to have their confidence. On consumption and distribution of Bollywood in Australia, well, it's all interrelated. The specialist distributors in Australia have the know-how, but as mentioned earlier, the engine of Bollywood consumption is largely the Indian diaspora around the world. And Australia is no different. We have Australian cinema chains showing blockbuster Bollywood films. Wide distribution offices of Bollywood films in Australia. Again, the mainstream Australian entertainment news channels or print media review or cover Bollywood films in the same manner as it's done for the non-Australian Hollywood films. This is where the awareness comes in, across the board. Just like you cannot expect the food editor of a mainstream media talk about or analyze a gourmet Indian dish of, say, rava dosa, or if the editor has grown up on a Western diet. It's the same for films. And the general Bollywood content in Australian mainstream media has to be projected more. The awareness is the key. I'm sure a lot of people have the interest and good intentions, but it's the effort and time which goes into understanding the culture to bring about, that awareness I've been talking about. I'm positive that this will happen as the number of people grow with the genuine interest in Bollywood and the Indian culture at large. 20 years ago when I came to Australia, I would say it was next to negligible. Now it's great to see that there is genuine interest to scratch beyond that large surface of Bollywood right here in Australia. I was fortunate enough to be one of the judges on the 2012 Australian SBS TV programs called The Bollywood Star, which was a franchise model out of UK, but a bold start by SBS to take the Bollywood phenomena to the wider Australia. It was open for all Australians of all ages and colours to have a go. This is what I love about Australia. If rightly packaged, people will have a go. We have a great following supported by Australian press, and on social media, the groundwork was set for this to become a flagship program for Bollywood-starved Australians. But for some reason, the series 2 did not come through. But it was a good beginning. Now, nevertheless, there are imported programs being shown on free-to-air national channels in Australia. Would like to see more of the homegrown stories, dramas in Australian TV. What interests me are the Australian stories set within the backdrop of Bollywood. Australians today come in all colors and backgrounds, just like what you see in Bollywood. It's possible. Yes, it is. And things are slowly started to move in the right direction. The awareness campaigns in terms of collaboration of private enterprise communications, festivities, IPL, yes, throw in a bit of cricket, never hurts, film festivals, talks, and most of all, people-to-people interactions can all help in getting the meaning of Bollywood out there. And most of all, the enjoyment which can come from it for all Australians from all walks of life. Now, I have been fortunate enough to show our film in festivals in Australia. My own connection with the film could be on many levels. I believe film festivals and interesting events and symposiums can all help to get the stories out there. We as creatives, producers, would like to see a collaboration of investors, writers, publicity and marketing to all come together to deliver great stories. And yes, it has to be business model to sustain in the long run. But that should not stop from creating the content in the first place. In the recent past, we have also seen Sydney and Melbourne film festivals screening independent Bollywood films. Would like to continue watching that space of indie cinema lovers in Australia. In Australia, we have great talent and we're a fair dinkum about what we do. I am positive once the Australians apply themselves, it's no stopping us to bring out the Bollywood content for the world. That is the power of the story, the oldest form of communication. known to us. Let's take the Australian stories to the world. Thank you.